Doing well. Huh? So we are going to start our uh, presentation on. Hmm? Okay. Yes, confirm if you can see the PowerPoint presentation on your screen.
Yes, I can see it.
All right, great. So we can start. Yeah, so we are going to look at the introduction to biochemistry. Um, Biochemistry is an important subject in the fields that you are in, that is public health, nutrition, and then also midwifery. So I'll be lecturing you, giving you different examples of the application of biochemistry in those fields. Um, so this is basically the first session, and in this first session we are basically going to look at the definition of biochemistry and the important uh, biomolecules, and then we look at the application of biochemistry. So this is basically a brief lecture that introduces you to the field of biochemistry. So when we talk about biochemistry, we are referring to the chemical processes that take place in living organisms. Okay, so chemical processes involve uh, biochemical molecules. Okay, so in our bodies we have molecules, and we look at the structure, the function, and the way these molecules actually interact with one another. We look at the chemical reactions that are involved, what enzymes are involved, what are the conditions for these biochemical reactions to take place. So that is the. Please make sure you mute uh, because we are recording this and we don't want to record our sessions with noise. These sessions are recorded and we don't want noise in them. Okay, I hope that is very clear. All right, so that is basically what biochemistry is. It deals with the study of chemical reactions of substances within organisms. We look at the chemical structure of these molecules, their function, and their interactions within the cells. So why is this very important? It's actually very important because it allows us to understand the structures of the different molecules, for example, the DNA, and the other pathways for generation of very important molecules, the pathways, for example, for generation of ATP, which is a form of energy, the pathways for generation of amino acids, the pathways for generation of important molecules in the body, for example, enzymes and other things. This is actually very key because we apply this knowledge in understanding uh, um, the structures of different receptors and how we can target those receptors using, for example, drugs. But also, it is an important. It has important applications in what we call protein engineering, and we shall look at this as we look at protein synthesis and also as we look at DNA replication. So we will basically look at those in the lectures to come. In the context that we are in, we apply uh, biochemistry knowledge in prevention of diseases and also in treatment of diseases. Okay, so when we use biochemical knowledge to handle medical complications or diseases, we are basically referring to medical biochemistry. That's the discipline. You will also realize that biochemistry has many other branches that um, our concentration is on the application of biochemical knowledge in, uh, in preventing diseases and also in treating diseases. And therefore, this knowledge is basically very important because it allows us to understand how diseases emerge, okay, or how biochemical processes contribute to diseases, okay. And then it also allows us to look at how the drugs we make interact with the different biomolecules in our bodies. Okay, so it also allows us to understand the nature of drug-to-drug interactions in our body after understanding the chemical structures of the different drugs. Okay, and also the interaction of these different molecules allows us to manufacture drugs for treatment of disease, and this is what basically we call uh, therapeutic interventions. Okay, so medical biochemistry is important in different fields. It is very important in nutrition. It's very important in pharmacology. It's very important even in midwifery. It's very important in genetics. Very important in understanding molecular biochemistry, molecular biology, and also biology, which is basically the study of diseases. Um, so when we are looking at biochemistry, we look at the structure of the micromolecules. Okay, micromolecules include the proteins, the carbohydrates, and then the nucleic acids. These are, for example, what I can call larger molecules. The macromolecules are larger molecules. We shall look at the structures of each of those. So structural biochemistry is a branch of biochemistry that looks at the structure of these macromolecules. So we can look at these molecules using different technologies. We can use nuclear magnetic resonance. We can use X-ray crystallograph, and then also we can visualize these molecules using the cyclo electron microscope. And then the other interest that we have, apart from looking at the structures, we are also interested in looking at the pathways. Okay, so for example, if there is a if we get energy from carbohydrates, what processes are involved in producing this energy in the form of ATP? So we look at those pathways, for example, but we also look at the synthesis of different molecules and also the breakdown of these molecules, or what you can term as um, catabolism and then anabolism. These are either synthesis of molecules or breakdown of molecules. So we look at the enzymes that are involved, the coenzymes, and then also how these biochemical processes are regulated. The term that we are using here is metabolic regulation. We can also look at biochemistry in the lenses of molecular genetics. In this, we are looking at the nature of molecules that contain our genetic material. In this case, basically the DNA. So with the DNA, we're interested in its structure, the process of its replication. We also look at transcription, translation, and how genes are expressed and their regulation. And then we have also what we call clinical biochemistry. For example, if you've got the hospital and you're sick, they can order for what we call, for example, liver function tests. Okay, with the liver function tests, uh, they are looking at important molecules that are either synthesized by the liver, and then they see if these molecules are either high or low. They can signify whether the liver is actually affected or not. So that field is basically what we call clinical biochemistry. It's a field that looks at these the you can call them biomarkers, you can call them molecules in the body that are usually found in the body fluids, and then we can uh, quantify these molecules or biomarkers, then arrive at a diagnosis whether you have a given disease or not. Or sometimes, if you're on a particular treatment, we can look at these biomarkers to either say that the treatment is working or it is not working. Okay, so biochemical analysis look at these things, and these are basically applied in clinical um, biochemistry. Okay, we also have what we call biochemical toxicology. Toxicology is basically the study of toxins. So within our bodies, we could have toxins, and we could be interested in understanding the structure of these toxins and how they cause injury to our cells, and what processes or what pathways these toxins undergo in order to cause any injuries to cells or tissues. So this is a field of biochemical toxicology. And then the last field or the last branch of biochemistry is what we call bioinformatics. With this, we are combining the study of biology that allows us to understand the different processes within a cell, their structures and everything, that we combine that knowledge with computer science and statistics to be able to generate what you call biological data, and then interpret this data and then reach conclusions. The practical application of this is basically what happens with if you go for a DNA test, or if you take your son or daughter for a DNA test, they basically get samples uh, from the child, and then also samples from you, and then look at the DNA sequencing and then see whether there is any linkage between the structures are similar in terms of sequence, and then they can either prove whether you're the biological father or not. So that kind of application is under what you call bioinformatics. So we have been talking about biomolecules. Basically, when we talk about biomolecules, we are referring to the major molecules. For example, here, the macro, which are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and then the nucleic acids. All of us know that we get energy from carbohydrates, but they also provide us with structure support. Um, we have different categories of carbohydrates: monosaccharides, disaccharides, and then the polysaccharides. And then there's the storage form in humans, that is glycogen. And then there's cellulose, which is found in plants, and then there's sucrose, and then also glucose. These are basically examples of carbohydrate, which can fall under different categories. Okay, whether polysaccharides, uh, monosaccharides, saccharides, I mean disaccharides, and all those. But we'll have a session to look at the different classes of carbohydrates and their structures. And then lipids are usually the reservoir for energy. We use them for insulation. They're also important components of the cell membranes. Um, we can categorize them as fats or oils, but we also have also steroids.
Okay.
And then proteins, these usually provide us with a structure. So help the electrons. We have proteins that help in transportation of the important molecules in the body, but also proteins are very important in communication, multiple signaling, and also in immune responses. So the proteins, their smallest unit are the amino acids, but we have also noted that we have enzymes, which basically proteins, antibodies, basically proteins. We also have structural proteins such as keratin. We also have hormones, which are proteins, things like that. And then lastly, the nucleic acid, which are basically the DNA and then the RNA. We'll look at this also in detail, but basically the nucleic acids can carry our genetic material. Okay, so for all those the molecules that I've talked about, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and then the lipids, and then the nucleic acid, they are basically made up of four major components or major elements: the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. So these are basically, for example, you look at what we call the organization of organisms. Okay, you start with the atoms, and then you come to elements, you come, and then to a molecule. Okay, so we are made. Our bodies are made up of those. Yes. So carbon, which is one of the predominant element, is actually very important. Um, the chemistry that is actually concerned with carbon is what we call organic chemistry, which you must have looked at in your secondary level education. So it has unique capabilities. For example, it can combine with other organic molecules, and basically it forms the backbone of organic molecules. It has the ability to combine with other four atoms for it to be stable. Okay, so that is carbon, which is the predominant element. So carbon forms bonds with other atoms. And like I've said, they can form after a maximum of four bonds. One of those types of bonds that is actually very key is what we call hydrogen bonding. With this, you have carbon and the other molecule combining through uh, what we call a force of attraction, that is usually created because of the difference in electronegativity. So there is a force. Hydrogen bonding is actually a force of attraction between two molecules. Okay, so it can be carbon and hydrogen. It can be with other elements. Okay, so for example, water. Water consists of hydrogen, two hydrogen and the oxygen atom. So the bonds between uh, hydrogen and then the water molecule is a hydrogen bond. So we also have hydrogen bonds in protein, have hydrogen bonds in nucleic acids, which is the DNA. So hydrogen bonds are actually very important. They fractals as a result of attraction between those molecules, and this actually comes as a result of the difference in electronegativity. We also have what you call polar covalent bonds. Okay. In here, you have electrons being shared between two molecules, and therefore resulting into what you call polar molecules. Okay. Polar molecules basically are those uh, that have both the positive charge and the negative charge at one point. Okay, so usually polar molecules can dissolve in polar solvents. This is just basically basic chemistry. We have talked about electronegativity. Perhaps you need to understand what it is. So you have you can have an atom that is that perhaps has a charge. Okay, this atom can have the ability to attract electrons towards itself, and as they attract these electrons, they form what we call a covalent bond. Okay, so electronegativity allows us to predict the chemical reactivity between uh, molecules. Okay, and that is what I earlier on said that polar molecules dissolve in polar solutions. So we can basically predict that kind of reactivity. Okay, so electronegativity influences the chemical reactions of molecules, but also electronegativity plays a role in formation of what we call chemical bonding, and then all the overall chemical structure of a given molecule. Okay, so that is our first lecture, Introduction to Biochemistry. I hope you have questions to ask. Time for questions. And so, as the part of what we are going to do, basically like what I communicated earlier on, is that we are going to be roll calling students, and we have a minimum of the number of lectures that you should attend before you do our exams. So for now, I'll be taking note of those who attended this. So we'll have Albino, Eguma, Gatcoach, and then we have James, then we have another James, Tariak, and then we have Joseph Okan, then we have Oyet, Charles, and then the was that. All right. So that marks the end of our presentation. Maybe I will ask one question. Okay, Eguma is asking. Yes.
Yes, good evening, sir.
Good evening to you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. This is James Tariakbul.
Yes.
Yes. I would like to know the difference between you talk about the carbohydrate. Also, you also elaborate more about also carbohydrate is a potential energy that give us also a power to do the activities, or is there
Mm.
also a energy giving food.
Mm.
Yes, so I would like also to know the differences between the carbohydrate and the protein, because uh, you also talk about the carbohydrate protein, that is a bodybuilding food, but um, I want to know the work of this between the carbohydrate and the, the protein, the connectivities of two.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes, another person. Yes, that watch. Yes, I've seen another hand by that
Are you getting
watch.
me? Are you getting me, sir?
Yes, I'm getting you. Yes.
Yes. I'm a bit confused because it is like chemicals when they are in the body. Is for my understanding is like they can cause problems to our bodies. And based on how I'm now understanding is like protein, carbohydrate, and other things are chemical substances. So if they are chemical substances, is it possible for chemicals to work well with our bodies?
Let
Are we together?
us I'm Egoma, you put your hand up.
Yes, hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is Guma speaking. Yeah, I'm grateful for having taken us through this session. It has been very important, and we are grateful for that. So, basically, I just wanted to have a brief hint on perhaps how do we apply knowledge specifically in this biochemistry during daily practice, like a public health student, which is myself, in the public health fraternity. Where can we apply these basics of biochemistry in the daily life or during our routines as public health students? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Those are very good questions. Yes. So we have many diseases that have their origin in the biomolecules. Okay. So let us say, for example, um, diabetes, for example. I'm trying to mute someone. Try to mute such that we hear ourselves. Okay. I guess we should be okay now. Yes. The two questions are related to um, how do we really apply the knowledge that we get from biochemistry in our practice. And someone was saying, okay, these molecules are good. How come they're actually bad sometimes? So they basically both those two questions focus on the application of biochemistry in the field of, for example, public health. So I was saying that the answer is that we have many conditions that arise as a result of malfunctions or dysfunctions of particular molecules in the body. So, for example, we have, let us start with sickle cell. sickle cell happens because of a problem in one of the chromosomes. Okay, and therefore, to prevent people from getting sickle cell, for example, we encourage what we call genetic counseling. Okay, so before people get married, they have to go for what we call genetic screening to check if they carry what we call the trait for sickle cell. Because sickle cell as a condition, you can either be a person who has sickle cell, and then we say you have the sickle cell disease. And then you can also be a person who has what we call a sickle cell trait. This means that you have the gene that is that carries the sickle cell defect, but it does not manifest in you physically. Now, if you get someone who is also carrying, or who is also carrying the trait, or who may not be carrying the trait, it is possible that you produce a child who has sickle cell. Okay, and then when you have a child who has sickle cell, uh, the likely possibility is that this child will, of course, take a lot of money from you because this child will be sick. Of course, uh, as they're growing up, you'll always be frequenting the hospital, you miss work, the child actually will actually eventually die. The child, one of the persons that I've had who had sickle cell for a long time, died at the age of 50. That's the longest. But usually in our African setting, it is very hard for them to reach 20th birthday, okay, because of different factors related to the health system. Okay, so this is basically one condition under which we apply biochemical knowledge. We know that sickle cell is caused because of a gene defect, and these gene defects can only be recognized if you understand the biochemistry of nucleic acids. In this case, it is just uh, uh, the DNA, and especially the X chromosome where the defect is carried. So that is basically one disease that we have seen where the defect is and what can be done. So that is why we encourage people to go for premarital genetic screening. Before you get married to anyone, please go for screening and see if you have any genetic issues. If they happen, then you prepare accordingly. Another basis for understanding biochemistry in public health relates to how different people react to different drugs. We have people who can have what we call adverse reactions. You give someone a given drug and then they react to the drug. But out of 1,000 people who receive this drug, you may have only one person reacting to the drug. That reaction to the drug may be because of either presence or absence of certain molecules in the body. In this case, usually it is because of absence of certain enzymes. Okay, and these enzymes are basically molecules. Yeah, which we have just talked about the fact that enzymes are proteinous in nature. Okay, so in our practice, for example, in public health, we have what we call pharmacovigilance. Pharmacovigilance is a term that relates to the fact that when people are receiving medications, we should take note of adverse reactions within the population. Okay, and then, for example, if we have a particular drug and many people within that population are reacting to the drug, then there's a problem. Okay, and then as a public health officer, then you say there's this problem and needs to be addressed. So the investigation of this problem will relate to how this drug actually interacts, or the biological mechanisms involved in the breakdown of this particular drug. So that is the application of biochemistry, because biochemistry allows us to look at the interaction of the different molecules, which either can be exogenous, those that come from outside, and then they're interacting with the molecules that we have in our bodies. Then they can either produce good good outcomes or negative outcomes, like the example I've given, which is basically a negative outcome. So in vigilance, but also in other fields. So, for example, in manufacturing of drugs, this is also very important. In also determining the cause of a particular condition and what damage does it cause. For example, if we looked at COVID-19, okay, COVID-19, what was the impact or what was the effect of this virus on the different molecules within the body? Or, for example, look at malaria. The malaria parasites, when they're within our bodies, what do they affect, and what is the implication of that effect? So, for example, if I may ask, what is the biochemical basis for the malaria parasite resulting into anemia? So you should explain this on the biochemical level. So you should be able to relate the interaction between the malaria parasites with the hemoglobin. What really takes place there? How do the malaria parasites result into hemolysis? Okay, so that's the question related to what a woman asked. And then the other question which relates to, okay, we are talking about carbohydrates and proteins, but how do they turn into something that is bad? Okay, let me give you one example for nutrition students. I guess here we have what we call glucose intolerance, or what you can call lactose intolerance. Okay, there are people who cannot take milk, for example. Lactose is the sugar in milk. So we have what we call lactose intolerance. Okay, they cannot tolerate taking milk. When they take milk, they just vomit. What's the biochemical basis of this? It's because they lack one of the enzymes, which is very important in digestion of this lactose. Okay, so you have all these clinical examples that directly link to biochemistry, and in our subsequent sessions we shall look at the structures of carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, the different metabolic processes, the pathways, glycolysis, Krebs cycle, what we call the TCA. We'll look at all this, glycogenesis, we'll look at all these processes. And then we shall also be linking them to our clinical practice. I guess I've answered the questions. The person who asked about the structures, functions, and other things related between proteins and carbohydrates, I think I'll forego that because we shall have separate sessions to look at the structure of proteins, metabolic processes of proteins, and all the rest. Any further questions? Yes, a woman.
I think it's not actually a question, but I'm just trying to compliment and appreciate you for the clarity that you have given. I think, in summary, I'm getting to realize that this biochemistry is really very important in public health, especially for people that have clinical background. It plays a great role in kind of explaining sometimes the pathophysiology of disease, how disease progresses in the body, and then also in relation to antigen antibody reaction like hypersensitivity, and then that plays a good role in the explanation. So I'm saying there's really these biochemistry forms a very good foundation and basis in such areas in public health. Thank you so much.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.